when I sit down and talk with the coaches, I talk with them the same way today, talking with Coach Charles. I talk with him as the exact same way I talked to Bill Curry or Gene Stallings back 30 years ago. I talk football. How are you going to do this? What are you going to do? What's your style of play? What's this team got to do? So for me, it's not changed.
Hey, welcome to Beat Everyone. It's another edition of The Golden Age. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com, and we're so glad to be back with living legend and our good pal, Mr. Eli Gold. And we're also joined by the athletics director of Jacksonville State University, Greg Seitz. Eli, it's always good to see you. Greg, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, always great to be with the man who hired me off the top of the scrap heap and gave me work. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going to get to that, believe me. But Greg, I just want to say, what an amazing season your football team just had. I mean, I was just reading ESPN's top 100 players from the 2024 season, and there was Trey Stewart, right? And obviously incredible numbers, helping to lead the team to a Conference USA championship, win over Western Kentucky in dominant fashion, an appearance in the Cure Bowl in Orlando. And obviously with Rich Rodriguez returning to West Virginia, you hired Charles Kelly, an Alabama native, a former Auburn player, somebody with a lot of familiarity with this state and JSU as a former assistant coach. So I know it's exciting times. And I was going to say, I know that you're a North Alabama graduate, but you've been part of JSU athletics for a few decades now, if you can believe it. The AD on a permanent basis since, I believe, 2016. Is that right? How special was last season? And I guess what's the outlook on JSU moving forward?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's almost like a dream when you go back and look, and because we were at FCS for so long. We've always been really good in football at Jacksonville State. We won the Division II National Championship in 1992, and then so we were very successful at Division II, made the move to Division I FCS, had a lot of success. We were the third winningest team since 2010, made numerous playoff appearances, appeared in the national championship game in 2016. And then once the opportunity to move to FBS came along, I reached out to some other athletic directors who had been through that process because we knew it wasn't going to be easy. And so I think the things that we learned from there, just from those conversations and stuff, really helped us be successful because we were the first team in the history of the NCAA to win a bowl game in our first year of eligibility, where we were able to go to the New Orleans Bowl and win that. And then this was our first year to be eligible for the Conference USA Championship. And lo and behold, we were fortunate to come out and win the Conference USA Football Championship and, made our second straight bowl appearance just from being eligible for there. So very fortunate, just, a lot of great things going on. But, and you touched on a little with Rich Rod. I told him, I was certainly very happy for him and his family and him the opportunity to go back home to West Virginia there. But, having a caliber of coach like Rich Rod he helped us more than honestly, we probably helped him from the aspect of he had been at the FBS level, he knew what it took to win, and he pushed us on the administrative side just to make sure that we were doing all the things that would allow them to be successful.
I think it was probably mutual, right? I'm sure that he had a goal of getting back to maybe even West Virginia, but he needed Jacksonville State to do that and that experience, and it obviously helped him a great deal. But, before we get to when Eli joined the JSU family, I'm curious, what was your relationship to Eli Gold before that, right? Were you a fan of his work? Did your paths ever cross prior to reaching out to him about being the voice of Jacksonville State?
Yeah, I really did. Eli and I have talked about this in the past. So I came up through the media relations side, sports information side. And so in 1995, I came to Jack State in 93. 1995, at the Alabama Sports Writers Convention, I met a guy named Jim Freeman. And Jim was the publicity director at the Talladega Superspeedway. And I had never been to a race at Talladega. I encourage your folks, if they've never been to Talladega, it's quite the experience. And so he had asked me if I wanted to come out and just kind of volunteer. So that was honestly the first time that back in those days, Eli, I believe we had the summer race in July.
Yes.
The
Hotter than Dickens.
The Die Hard 500.
Yes.
And so that's the first time that I had met because I was in the infield media center, just working as a volunteer from there. But our jobs, because we were working for the track, was to help the media, and obviously with Eli's work with the MRN, the Motor Racing Network, we would kind of help him if he needed any help, just coordinating interviews or when he'd come in the media center. So that was my first interaction with Eli. And then, we kind of, just touch base. I've done a lot of work with the SEC and with the NCAA and stuff, so our paths would occasionally cross, but Talladega was the first time that I'd ever met Eli.
But everybody knows Greg Seitz. I mean, I tell a joke about, a guy and his family going to St. Peter's for the interview with the Pope, an audience with the Pope, and here they open up the big windows and everybody walks out onto the balcony, and you hear the guy say, "Now, who's that guy up there with Greg Seitz?" It's everybody knows Greg Seitz, but that's where we did first meet, amongst the roar of racing engines at Talladega.
Wow, quite the reputation then there, right? Everybody knows Greg Seitz. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, I mean,
It's true.
well,
It's true.
I appreciate it. I think, because of my background through media relations and stuff, I'm truly a relationship guy.
Sure.
I just think that's just kind of who I am. And, way I've always been raised and stuff. And so I try to meet, and even when I'm talking to folks like, hey, give me some advice. And I always say, meet as many people as you can, because you never know down the road where you may encounter that individual again. So I'm really big on relationships.
Well, here we're sitting, right, with Eli, and obviously y'all have a working relationship now. But Greg, take me to where you were in sort of your state of mind when you learned that Eli Gold was a free agent, right? Like, we've talked about his departure here on a few occasions from Alabama, and Eli has really opened up about it and given us a lot. But what did that look like from your vantage point, and when did you know that you were going to make the pitch to Eli?
Yeah, it's a great point. And I'm not sure if Eli has talked about our Zoom call. I've started, whenever we had the COVID came in, we were all sitting at home like, what are we going to do? So I actually started a Zoom call every Wednesday. And so we really just started off with folks who I have had encounters with. I'm fortunate enough to work the men's Final Four. This will be my 14th year to be on the media coordination team. I've worked the SEC basketball tournament for a number of years. So I really got a lot of the former sports information directors and folks that kind of are my close friends on there. And during that time, I would invite and have different guests on each week. And so we were playing Alabama and men's basketball, and I ran into Eli at the Hey Coaches show over at Baumhauer's, and I said, Eli, I know this is crazy, but I said, I do this weekly Zoom. Would you mind jumping in one week and just kind of being our guest? And he's like, Zoom call, what are you talking about? What do you do? I said, you'll know almost everybody on the call. I said, it's just a lot of friends. Just kind of on our Zoom is like David Housel from Auburn and Claude Felton from Georgia and Bud Ford from Tennessee. So a lot of the kind of what we refer to as the old timers on there. And I said, I think you'll enjoy it. And so Eli was gracious enough to get on and enjoyed the call. And he's like, well, hey, I may get on another time. So we left him kind of on our invite list. So Eli had actually been on our call pretty regularly every week through there. So I had, so I had learned that, they were considering the stuff at Alabama. And then, obviously when he was going through his medical issues and stuff, I would call and check on him through Miss Claudette and stuff, on that aspect of it. And so whenever it appeared that, Eli had said, I really haven't heard much on my contract and stuff. Well, sitting in my seat, I kind of knew what that meant, right? If you haven't already been extended or you haven't already had any conversations about your contract, it's probably, from Eli's standpoint, probably wasn't going to end well, on his standpoint. So we actually I came over one day and was getting my car serviced, and I told Eli, I said, hey, why don't we go to lunch one day? And then he says, I don't know, what's going to happen down the road. And I said, well, I'm always looking to hire good people at Jack State. And so actually at the time, I had a sports information assistant who also had some radio background. And so he was covering our women's basketball, but then he would do all of our baseball games on television. Well, he had accepted a job in West Georgia, which was closer to home for him. And so actually the timing was well. Eli, he had called and said, well, hey, I just finished a meeting. I'm not going to be retained. And earlier that week, my sports information guy had let me know that he wasn't going to be able to do our baseball games, that he was going to be accepting another job. But if we needed him to come on and help. And so I called him, within 2 hours once he got the official word, and I said, well, hopefully you'll be able, I can put you to work for a little while, Eli. I said, we've got an opportunity you can do all of our ESPN Plus broadcasts for our baseball games. Last March, I think a Samford game was your first game to do.
Yes, it was in early March, and I started, and I needed somebody to work with, and I knew Coach Jim Case, but not well. But he had come to an Alabama-Tennessee game with Greg that preceding season, and so I said to Greg, who would you suggest for a color man? I can describe what's going on, but I didn't have the depth of history of JSU baseball because it was really the first time I'd been involved. And he said, well, we'll make a few calls, and he called Jim Case. And son of a gun, if he didn't say yes, and we've become great friends, and I think we turn out a pretty good telecast. But one job led to the next, and we started talking more, and then, well, how about women's basketball, and then how about some men's basketball, and then how about the talk show? See, Mike Paris has been the voice of JSU forever now, 42 years, 47 years, something like that. Which is not bad since he's only 52 years old. But no, I was very, very, very careful not to step on his turf. He was the guy. He was the man that the folks were used to hearing. That was his job. When Greg and I started talking, the first call I made beside Greg was to Mike. And I said, look, if you start hearing anything, yes, we're talking. This is about the TV stuff, not about the radio. I'm not taking your job. I don't want you to lose a minute's sleep over this. And I've known Mike, of course, forever, but I made sure with everything that Greg offered, I made sure that it was not going to take anything away. And then the talk show was not anything Mike was really big on. He wasn't a huge fan of hosting the coaches show. So I said, I'll do it. And, so one job led to the next, to the next, to the next. And here we are. So I couldn't be happier. And it's worked out great with wonderful people at JSU. And it didn't impact Mike Paris to any degree.
Yeah, important to do right by him.
Yes.
It sounds like, well, Eli's in here, and he's obviously proudly wearing his JSU attire, right?
Yep.
The sweatshirt. He's been very clear about the welcome that he received at JSU by you and the entire family. And I wonder how you and the JSU family feel about that. Like, what did it mean for such, not to embarrass Eli here, but for such a beloved broadcasting figure in person? What did it mean to bring somebody like that to Jacksonville?
Oh, it was very important for us. I mean, when you look at Eli's career and legacy, through there, I mean, he is, he's the true voice of Alabama football, right? 36 years there. And then the NASCAR, over 42 years of doing NASCAR. So, I mean, when you go about and look at those opportunities, I think it kind of lined up a lot similarly. Honestly, it's like Rich Rodriguez when we were able to hire him at football. I mean, first you get instant credibility. And for us, we were able to expand our TV viewership, which was important for us. So this past year was the first time that our coaches show had ever been televised. It had always been a radio-only show. And so just by having Eli come in and be able to host those shows, obviously it's easier to go out and get sponsors and get people to work with you because they know you're going to do it the right way because of who you have hosting it. And, I want to echo what Eli said about Mike Paris. I mean, we had conversations as well because I didn't want Mike to feel, and no offense to Eli, but I didn't want Mike to, to feel like what just had happened to Eli was happening to him. So we wanted to be very clear, with Mike and says, look, you are the voice of Jack State football. His car tag even has a voice on it, and it's a Jack State tag. And so, but I wanted to make sure he was comfortable with that. Eli wanted to make sure he was comfortable with that. But it was an opportunity for us to grow on our television side. And I'll tell one quick story. It was pretty amazing because Mike is, he's been doing Jack State forever. And so, Mike, he doesn't want to miss a basketball game. He doesn't want to miss any of those games. So this past fall, we actually opened at Air Force in basketball. And so Mike was out there in Colorado Springs on a Thursday, and we were at Louisiana Tech, and he was going to join us for the football game. Well, they had one of those early fall snowstorms, and he got snowed in Colorado Springs.
Along with the team.
Along with the
they couldn't
team
get home.
and everybody, and we're like, okay, and not that you ever want to prioritize sports, but from a sponsorship standpoint for those, certainly football, we have to broadcast all of our football games. And then it comes to basketball, then, you kind of go down the line. And so we're like, well, man, our lead play-by-play guy who hasn't missed a game in over 40 years, there's no way for him to get there. But fortunately, we had a pretty good backup with Eli. And so I called Eli, and I said, Eli,
On a Friday afternoon.
I said, Eli, I said, hey, I know this is short notice and stuff, but I said, Mike is snowed in with our basketball team at Colorado Springs. What do you think about jumping into the football, to the radio chair again and helping us out with that? And certainly, and I've seen your episodes, Eli's such a preparer. That's one of the things that it amazes me. And so, for the coaches show and stuff, he goes ahead and gets his sheets and is just prepared because, Rich Rod's there. He wants to make sure that he's well informed and educated as he's doing the coaches show. So he had a lot of the work done, but I know he still had a lot to do. And so we were able to let him fly with us, because we usually fly with a donor to those games. And so Eli was able to jump in and help us this year, on the radio. But I said it's a pretty good backup when you've got Eli Gold to call.
I did a few basketball games when there was a football conflict and Mike had to stay with the football team. I went to Daytona Beach, ironically, a city I had only been to a few thousand times, and I did the tournament, the basketball tournament there. So I'm here to work at their beck and call, and I'm just loving it. I really am.
Well, before we take a break, Eli, I wanted to ask you, is you go from 36 years calling Alabama, and then you have your first year, calling JSU. Is calling a game, or were there any stark differences in your approach?
In my approach and the actual science of calling the game, no differences. It's a game, it's the next game. There were things that I had to adjust to. I was so used to saying, touchdown Alabama. I did not want to blurt that out in the middle of a JSU broadcast. And when I did that first radio show in the first radio game at Louisiana Tech, I made sure, I double clutched to make sure I said, Gamecocks or whatever it was, make sure I didn't accidentally, although I will tell you that still happens. The other day I was in, I forget where we were, Eastern Kentucky. I had to fill in again for Mike. There was a conflict, and I did the game at Eastern Kentucky, and I'm getting ready to tape the pregame show with the coach. And I said, welcome back, Alabama basketball today again. And I said, whoops, sorry, coach. I said, old habits. He goes, I understand, don't worry. And it was on tape, of course, so we started again. But no, it's not been difficult. It's just been, different, in many ways, You're not dealing with 100,000 people. The ingress and egress is a whole lot different and so on. But, I love it. I really have loved it. And we've said that on this show many times, so I'm not saying that just because the boss is sitting right here to my side. They treat you and care about you like a person. You're not a commodity. You're a person. They are so friendly, so caring. Just like the day he sent a text to my wife on Mother's Day. We're driving, and she gets a text on her phone from Greg wishing her a happy Mother's Day, and again, just wanted to welcome you to the Jacksonville State family. Well, that's the first Mother's Day text that she had ever gotten from any athletic director anywhere in any year. Just stuff like that. They just care about you as a person. And you just I can't stress how special it is.
Why is that important as an AD and as a human being to approach your job in that type of relationship that way?
I think for me, just because of my background, as I stated earlier, I came up through the media relations side. But early in my career, I was also doing athletic promotions, and then I did football game management. So I really have done a lot of roles there. And I feel like that it's important, like even today after a game, after a basketball game, I'm down there, and if there's something I can do to help, our facility staff or something like that, I think it's just, it makes them feel, not that they need to feel important, but they are very important at Jacksonville State. We don't have 300 employees like a lot of the SEC schools. And so every job is important for that. And I think if they see me there, and I'm willing to help, whether it's fold up chairs or whatever, clean off the scores table or anything, that they'll take more pride in their job. And they're saying, well, look, our athletic director is doing this. And so, I'm willing to, hopefully get in, because I think they will see, no job's too small, for the athletic director. And so, and I think it goes back to my, kind of my philosophy on relationships that, how many of us love getting a handwritten note in the mail today, right? Nobody really does that. Mm-hmm. So I'll make a point where I send out about 5 handwritten notes a week to our donors or fans or, people who have impacted our program in some way, just because, you can call it old school or those things, but it just makes you feel good. Yep. It really does.
Goes a long way. Well, appreciate y'all sharing that. We're going to take a quick break here on Beat Everyone, the Golden Age edition, of course, more with Eli Gold and special guest, Jacksonville State AD Greg Seitz. Just a bit. Stick around. Welcome back to Beat Everyone. I am Ben Flanagan. This is the Golden Age edition. Of course, we're with Eli Gold, and we're with Jacksonville State AD Greg Seitz. And, for so many episodes, we've talked about Eli's life and career. Most of it obviously focused on calling Alabama football and other sports, obviously. But we're in an unpredictable and exciting, and I'm sure in many ways challenging era of college athletics with the advent of NIL and the transfer portal and other ways the landscape has really changed rapidly. I'm just curious about how you navigate it as an AD. There are obviously a lot of plates spinning at once when you run an athletics department, but how would you describe your approach to NIL specifically and how JSU can succeed in the current system?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think, for all of the group of 5 schools, obviously we don't have the, with the House settlement impeding and stuff, we don't have $20.5 million in revenue to share. And, very few, in our state, beyond Auburn and Alabama, there's not going to be another school in our state with that. So I think you just do the best that you can. Our fans, we're very fortunate because our fans and supporters are very passionate about Jacksonville State. So we're able to, we do have some NIL and some revenue share. So I think we kind of pick our spot of where we're at. We know we're not in the SEC at that level, but, at the group of 5, we want to be the tops in Conference USA, which is where we compete and, where our fans and stuff are going to see us and where we can excel to win the championship. And I think when you look at our first year in football and we're able to do that, we have a world-renowned bowling coach and bowling team. And so we were fortunate to win the national championship this past year in bowling. We were kind of another first, and that we were the first team in the history of the NCAA to win a national championship in the first year of having the sport. And so I think we just have found our niche, and and we're just going to continue to work it that way.
I guess if you're focusing on like football specifically, what is the biggest challenge with the NIL era?
Yeah, I think it's because, it's just, things change every day. There's another lawsuit. And so the NCAA's response is, well, we're going to do nothing until we can figure out this House settlement, and that Judge Wilkin will approve that later this month. But, the goalposts move literally every day. And so if you want to be successful and continue, you've got to move with those and adapt to those changes. And so I think if we can get some federal guidelines from Congress. And when I say that, now we don't want them, just saying, okay, you now have the opportunity, here's a cap, or what are those things? Now, we certainly don't want them into the day-to-day operations, because we see how that works in the federal government, right? So it really doesn't work very well. But if they can just give us some rules and guidelines that will allow the NCAA to kind of come in and make rules without the threat of lawsuits. Honestly, that's our biggest challenge. Right now, I just got back from the NCAA convention, and then we had our winter retreat with Conference USA. And Charlie Baker was on our call yesterday for about an hour, and it's literally just, okay, if we can make some rules and get some parameters without the threat of lawsuits, then we can, I think, begin now, okay, how are we navigating this new world of what, everybody is, it's so different than what any of us are used to there. I mean, 10 years ago, I mean, none of us would have ever imagined that we would be paying, that our football players are going to be making more money than a lot of the coaches. And, and it's just, it's ironic because when you consider it and look at it, these kids are 18 to 21, 22 years old. They're going to be probably making the most money they've ever made in their lives. So what is going to be the impact when their playing season is over and they're not fortunate to go to the pros? Now they go out and they get a job making $50,000. Yet they're used to having hundreds of thousands of dollars for 3 or 4 years. It's certainly going to be a lifestyle change, right, for them. And so I think for us as an educational institution, and certainly at Jacksonville State, we're not paying the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I am all for a kid being able, to leave college debt free. And that's honestly our goal at Jack State is, how can we help them do that where they're not, have a lot of debt when they get out of school. And then when they go out and get that job, now they can obviously be great husbands and fathers and wives and mothers and throughout their career.
Right. I mean, obviously, this is the era of player empowerment, right? Like both at the college level and at the professional level. And obviously, like you want players to succeed. I mean, you hear people say all the time, like players deserve to be paid. They create a lot of value for these programs and for themselves in doing all this. But it sounds like, I mean, there needs to be some oversight. There needs to be some sort of regulation. I mean, people have, and a lot of coaches publicly have said things like, there needs to be a commissioner. Nick Saban should be the commissioner of college football. Is that a realistic concept? Is that something that you would support?
Well, certainly if there was ever going to be someone for the commissioner of football, Nick Saban would be the best thing. But I've stated this earlier. There is not a single rule in the NCAA manual that the membership didn't vote on and approve. And, and I always laugh and chuckle because everybody thinks that there's these people in Indianapolis that make all these rules and force them on the schools. That is further from the truth. The membership, we are the NCAA, the membership. So in Division I FBS football, there's 134 schools. We vote on every single rule that's proposed. And everybody is great with the rule until it impacts your school or your fan base or your quarterback because he, is out of eligibility or those things. Then you're like, okay, how can we get around the rules? Well, that's why the NCAA manual is grown so thick because we started off with a pretty small set of rules. Then people would figure a way to get around that rule. So we'd have to pass another rule, to say, hey, this is the, the specific recruiting dates, or you can't sign scholarship, you can't sign a kid to a track scholarship and have him play football. And so, but every one of those rules were all voted on by the association. And I think we're all good with those rules until it impacts us, and so everybody's always looking for an edge. And so I think, even if we had our own associate, and if they're saying, well, if the Power Four moves away, at the end of the day, we still got to have rules. I mean, you can't just go out and allow everybody to do anything they wanted, just from a fair, just competition and stuff. I mean, we've got to have some set of parameters and rules, just like we have them when you're driving down the highway. The speed limit is this, and you need to obey the rule.
Do you have to run everything past the university president, past Dr. Killingsworth, even to the point of, the most minute item? Does he have the final say ultimately, or does that stick within the athletic department?
Yeah, so it really depends on, Eli, what we're trying to do. So, I mean, if it's something that, is going to impact the entire university, I'll certainly get the president's blessing, but also, like, I would even get our board of trustees blessings on something like that. Now, if it's just, hey, we're sending out a bid for a new, refrigerator over in the suites, no, I mean, we're not getting into the weeds on that. But if it's something that is going to have a major impact on the department, we would 100%, I would always get the blessing of the president and then sometimes even our board.
And by the way, he mentioned the suites. That's one thing that Jacksonville State, and I dare say other schools of this size, but JSU I can speak of directly, they are so good at spending the money that they have. They may not have the most, but they are so judicious. I mean, I'll put their suites up against in any Division I university stadium. And just because it's a 25,000 seat stadium, doesn't mean any. I mean, they spend the money so judiciously. That's one thing that's really impressed me.
Well, Eli, this has been such a pleasure, working with you. So I'm sure, like, we'll expect an invitation at some point to the suites.
You've
I mean, it sounds
always
like,
got one.
yeah, okay, good. It's good to know
Yes.
now that you've put it that way. But Eli, I wanted to ask you. I mean, somebody who's been covering college athletics for as long as you have, you've got the best seat in the house you have for so long. And as we've noted here, it's changing, but it's always been changing for the time that you've been calling it. But now seems like kind of a unique time in the sport. What do you think of college sports right now? Football, basketball, whatever specifically, like just as a whole, how has it changed in your mind? Is it better? Is it worse? Or is the job largely the same for you?
For me, the job is largely the same. When I go in and talk to running back A or quarterback B or whatever, I'm not sitting there thinking, this guy's making $300,000 or something. That's so far from my train of thought. I'm there to talk football. I'm there to bring that product to the listener at home. And after he's worked or she's worked all day, they don't want to be bothered by the business of the business. They want to hear whether their favorite team is winning, losing, why, what have you. So for me, the approach hasn't changed. I'm aware of everything. I'm not walking around with my head in the sand. But when I sit down and talk with the coaches, I talk with them the same way today. Talking with Coach Charles, I talk with him as the exact same way I talked to Bill Curry or Gene Stallings back 30 years ago. I talk football. How are you going to do this? What are you going to do? What's your style of play? What's this team got to do? So for me, it's not changed. I know it's different, but for me, it's not changed. My job is to bring the color, the pageantry of the people's favorite team to them in their car, their living room, wherever. And that's what I do. I don't worry about the other stuff. I give the fans what they want, and that's who won, who lost, and why.
It seems like that'll always stay the same, hopefully, anyway. Yeah. And Greg, so much of the national spotlight and conversation is given to programs like Alabama and Auburn and the SEC and these Power 4 schools that you mentioned. What do you glean from those places? Or are you watching and learning and letting that inform and influence the way that you manage it? Or is it we're all learning this at the same time and we kind of have to figure it out for ourselves?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, obviously they're, at the Power 4 level, they do a lot of great things, but they have a lot more resources. They also have a lot more expenses than we do. And so for me, Eli kind of touched on it earlier, I want to make sure that, if a donor is giving us money, that we're getting the best value out of that donation. And how can we also improve and put a great product on the field so I can sell more tickets and make sure all of our suites are full, because at the end of the day, that helps us be successful because we're able to generate revenue, to put back into our program and stuff. So I think it's really a combination of both of those. And, what I really enjoy and why I like to work at a lot of the NCAA events and stuff is kind of two-part is, you're able to see how things are run at a high level, right, from that aspect. But also you make a lot of connections and you meet a lot of people. So for us, we really do need those football guarantee games, right? So we want to play one of those a year. And I've been fortunate because I'm able to schedule those games based off of the relationships of people that I may meet at an NCAA championship or an event from that aspect of it. So, Alabama's not going out and scheduling, guarantee games. They don't need it. Their guarantee games is a home game, at Auburn or in Tuscaloosa. But for us, we need those games. It just helps us.
Well, as we start to wind down here, I do have another media question. You're obviously very media savvy, have a lot of experience with it. As the AD, like I said, there are a lot of spinning plates. You're having to focus on all these different aspects of the department, the sports themselves, the coaches' contracts, NIL, clearly enhancing the fan experience, broadcasting, right? The broadcasting team. How critical is that? Why was it important to bring in somebody like Eli Gold, but to create that fan experience through the broadcast of your sporting events? like how cognizant are you that has to be top tier quality?
Oh, I mean, it's one of the top two things that I do every day. And obviously, when we had the opportunity to hire Eli, our broadcast department honestly was run by, it was kind of a part-time job on our campus. And so I was like, well, look, if we've got Eli, got the best in the business on the broadcast side, we've got to put a good product out there with our cameras, with the audio, so we don't have audio issues and those things. So we were fortunate to hire Bill Bubba Bussey from the Rick and Bubba Show. He's a Jack State grad. He's an engineer by nature. And so whenever I saw that their show was coming to an end, similarly with how it worked out with Eli, I reached out to him. So we hired Bill Bussey to come in, and he's running all of our broadcasts now. And so now when there's an audio issue, I mean, with him, with his nature of being an engineer, he can get that resolved quickly. Whereas in the past, I mean, we may have went a whole quarter for that, which is, it's not only, it's embarrassing to the university because now they can see the play, but they can't hear it. And, Eli would be embarrassed because at no fault of his own, but he was the face of the TV broadcast. Well, it just wasn't a good look. So I wanted to make sure that from an administrative standpoint, we never put Eli in that position. And we want our fans to have the best experience. And because they're the ones promoting our program. And at the end of the day, for our university and for our president, it's about student recruiting, right? And so if we were fortunate this year, we had 11 nationally televised football games, including our bowl game. Well, a school like Jacksonville State would never be able to afford that type of publicity on a national scale. And so we were able to put our best foot forward, and hopefully that will end up turning in not only great athletes because they all want to play on national TV, but also drive our enrollment, for Jacksonville State.
It's like broadcasting transfer portal. You're watching it like a hawk, right? And
Oh.
like obviously it's smart to like keep an eye on the market and like make sure that you're understanding your audience, right? Bringing in like Eli and these other folks that are so familiar to an Alabama audience. So that's really smart. Eli, I mean, we're going to conclude here. This is 20 episodes now that you have shared stories with us, about Alabama football, about your life and your career, so many professional and personal things that you have been open about. I mean, you have opened up to us, and, oftentimes you will address the camera as you speak directly to the fans, and I just want to give you an opportunity as we close here, perhaps, until the next time we return to this table, whenever that may be, what message would you like to send your fans and the fans that have been listening to you for so long?
Well, the big message is thank you. That's all I really need to say. You have all sorts of choices to make on the radio or the TV, and stopping to watch or listen to our product is the best thing you could have done. And I thank you so much for doing that. There's nothing like, I tell people all the time, I work my butt off, but I've never worked a day in my life. I love what I do, and I do it for you. I work for you, and I'll never forget that. And I work for you too,
Well,
but I work for the viewers.
Eli, we appreciate that. And Greg, it's been such an honor to have you join us today. We really appreciate your time and coming and doing this with us. And Eli, I mean, this has been such an incredible run. We've learned, so much from you.
We've got to do it again.
I hope so. Yeah, and as a longtime fan of your work, as somebody who has watched and listened to you for many years, I mean, whether we're on or off the air, just wanted to say it's been a privilege to sit here with you, to listen to your stories, and it's really, truly been a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And we do have one of our members not here today, Michael Casagrande, who was very much a part of this show, and the fact that he couldn't be with us today. I say thank you, Lord. No, I'm just kidding.
I mean, I wasn't going to say anything about Michael, so I guess I'm glad you did.
Yeah, no, he did a great job, and I love reading his work, and you guys just keep it up at AL.com.
Thank you. He's all right. All right. Well, Eli, Greg, thank you both so much. It really has been a privilege talking to you today. You can find Beat Everyone on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And for Greg Seitz and Eli Gold, I'm Ben Flanagan. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.